The state of Louisiana has long been renowned for its culture and good food. When the average American thinks of the culinary scene in Louisiana, they're largely thinking of the seafood that the state is known for. Now imagine if Louisiana were nearly completely devoid of seafood. Would this outcome lead to a state lacking in cultural heritage in the way that we know and understand it today? I'd hate to think so, but this outcome would be a high probability without the presence and the foundation of the marine ecosystem in the state. In Louisiana's marine environment, one of the cornerstone species is the eastern oyster. This species of bivalve mollusk is indigenous to the state, serves as a vital food resource for countless marine species, and they support a vibrant commercial fishery in the state. Without the presence of the eastern oyster in Louisiana's marine environment, the diversity of this ecosystem could largely collapse. The eastern oyster has been a popular delicacy across the United States for generations, and modern landing volumes and sales figures tend to reflect that. The Gulf of Mexico is the largest contributor to oyster sales in the United States, with nearly 86% of all oysters harvested having been sourced from this region. Louisiana is the most prolific supplier of oysters in this region, accounting for an average of 47% of all oysters sold nationwide over the past 20 years. This volume of oysters sold in the region is intriguing considering the fact that Louisiana has very few naturally occurring reef structures, which are critical for the development of any oyster species. Unlike many marine bottoms in the United States, which are composed of mostly sand, the Louisiana marine bottom is comprised of gravel, silt, and clay. This marine bottom composition is mainly due to the myriad of river deltas in Louisiana, including the Mississippi River Delta, which deposits large volumes of silt and clay along the coastline. In the absence of natural reefs in this region, this begs the question: how does Louisiana support sustainable oyster fisheries at such a high level? In 1986, the state of Louisiana and relevant wildlife management entities formed the Louisiana Artificial Reef Program. This program was devised to create new artificial reefs in the state to bolster fisheries, including the eastern oyster. Since the time that this program was instituted, nearly 200 artificial reefs have been constructed inshore, nearshore, and offshore. There have been a number of artificial oyster reefs constructed since that time, with nearly 50% of these reefs having been constructed since 1999. There were a large number of commercial artificial oyster reefs constructed in Louisiana in 1997, 2004, 2006, 2007, 2011, and 2017. It takes an eastern oyster approximately 2 to 4 years to reach market size, which is 3 inches in length or more. Once oysters reach market size, they can be harvested and taken to market for sale. Based on available NOAA Fisheries and Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries data, there are noticeable increases in oyster landing volumes in the state 2 to 4 years after the initial construction of an artificial oyster reef. This indicates that artificial oyster reefs are not only a sustainable way to cultivate oysters in the short term, but they are also an effective method at sustaining this fishery in Louisiana in the long term. It is this practice of cultivating oysters that has allowed for Louisiana to be the #1 producer of oysters in the U.S. over the past 20 years. In the absence of the Louisiana Artificial Reef Program, this fishery would certainly not be as effective and prolific as we know it as today.